football, that kind of football, is ours. They call it American football.
Are the right in America becoming the very wokies that we thought we'd got rid of?
In a lot of ways, yes. I'm kind of tired of getting outraged by the same thing every year. I think it's ridiculous for people, especially on the right, who get their panties in a bunch and clutch their pearls about everything that Hollywood does. Maybe I'm just a dumb American. No, I don't even know who that is.
You don't know who Pavarotti is? Now, you are a world authority on somebody called Clavicular, who I have to say hasn't brushed my life particularly.
He is a looksmaxxer. Do you know what looksmaxxing is?
President Trump and MAGA skillfully rode the post-woke wave as that whole joyless mindset came crashing down. The left have become the sneering, censorious ogres demanding puritanical fealty. Conservatives were the ones having a laugh, to quote J.D. Vance, as star athletes honoured the Trump YMCA dance and a nation bathed in woke tears. Well, last year's Super Bowl really proved the point. The ads were full of bros, burgers and bikinis. The new president got a standing ovation. But how quickly things can change. Of course, it's difficult to maintain that renegade spirit when you're actually in power. You have to make unpopular decisions. People realise that you can't, in fact, please everybody all the time. And a lot of the furious reaction to Bad Bunny's spectacular and largely non-political halftime show at this year's Super Bowl, it's worth asking whether the culture is now shifting. Is MAGA becoming a bit thin-skinned, a bit sneering, a bit censorious, a bit, dare I suggest it, woke? Well, Brett Cooper, host of The Brett Cooper Show, is a foremost cultural commentator. She joins me to discuss all that and more. Brett, welcome back to Uncensored.
Happy to be here. Hope you are well, Piers.
Very well. Are the right in America becoming the very wokies that we thought we'd got rid of? Oversensitive, very hypocritical, getting enraged by absolutely everything?
In a lot of ways, yes, but I don't really think that that's a new thing. I think that we were just more united in fighting the left, and the left was, I think, a bigger creature rearing its head. But now, because the right feels very fractured and we're debating a lot of big issues and people are, trying to find out who they're going to follow, especially in light of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I feel like he was just such an important person who held the coalition together. That I think there is just a lot of fracturing. And I talk about this on my show all the time, but I do feel like there is a lot of hypocrisy and people are getting outraged over things that I would normally just kind of let roll off us. Like, you were talking in your intro just there about the Super Bowl and Bad Bunny. And I didn't like the performance. Like, it wasn't my cup of tea. I don't listen to his music. I think it is hilarious that in leading up to the Super Bowl, the football team, the Seahawks, their social media team did a funny video where it was like, hey, they talked to all the players and they said, so what is your favorite Bad Bunny song? And all the players were like, I have no idea. Like, I don't listen to him. They could not name a single song. One of the players even said, Piers, he was like, I don't listen to her. Like, didn't even know that it was a man. And so it's not my cup. I don't think it was a lot of people's cup of tea, but I really am not spending a lot of breath getting angry about it because I'm kind of tired of getting outraged by the same thing every year. People were upset about Kendrick Lamar.
But you know what I thought, though, Brett? Do you know what I thought? It was interesting because I didn't know much about Bad Bunny, if I'm honest with you. Really, like very little at all. I'd barely heard of the guy, right? And then I discovered after the Grammys, where he made his sort of quite political speech there, I thought, well, who is this guy? So I then did a bit of research. And I discovered he's the biggest singing star on planet Earth. He is Spotify's most downloaded guy year in, year out for the last few years. He is a Latino rapper of unbelievable popularity and success. He's also, in many ways, a kind of American dream story. He comes from Puerto Rico, from very little money or anything, or privilege. His dad was a truck driver. His mum was a teacher. And he worked hard. He was part of a God-fearing Catholic family. He went to church. He was, by all accounts, a very good young man. And he gets into music and he progresses and he keeps working hard. He's very disciplined. No real scandal attached to him. And he becomes the biggest Latino rapper in history and the pinnacle for any entertainer of any kind, if you're in America, and for the rest of the world, frankly, is to be the halftime show at the Super Bowl. So I woke up this morning in London. I didn't look at social media deliberately. I decided to just watch the whole halftime show from start to finish and make my own mind up. And I loved it. I thought as a spectacle, it was the best thing I've ever seen in halftime. You know, I think the best show was probably Michael Jackson or Prince or whatever, but they were just like short gigs with 6, 7 banging songs, and they nailed it. This guy put on a kind of Broadway production on a massive scale, and he told a story. It was about love and about marriage. It was actually a real marriage went on in the middle of this, which he took part in. He talked about America being part of the Americas as well, and how he wanted unity and everyone coming together. It was hopeful, it was inspiring, it was positive. And at the end he said, God bless America. And by the way, I loved the way he performed. And I loved the singing. And I thought, I'm not that used to it, but I love Latino music. I think he's brilliant, this guy. So now I'm a big Bad Bunny fan. But then I turned on social media. And suddenly I realized, actually, he's the devil incarnate. It was all disgusting, all disgraceful, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, really? Come on, guys. Come on. I also watched the Kid Rock thing. You know, the rival one. That was good to watch too. I enjoyed that as well. Why can't we all just agree they were both pretty good?
Well, I think that's the point that that I'm walking away with, is that it's great that there's another option, because again, every single year people on the right, and I have partaken in this, and this year I just don't think I really had the energy. Like, I barely watched the Super Bowl. I was in the kitchen with the baby making chocolate chip cookies and hanging out with my family and friends. But it's great that there are multiple options, because again, every single year there is outrage. There is some kind of, satanic symbols that people are angry about. They don't like what Kendrick Lamar is talking about. They don't like the Rihanna did this. They don't like the Beyonce did this. Whatever it is, there's always outrage. Everybody's going to have an opinion. And so I do think it's great that TPUSA offered an alternative. It was great. It got millions of views. I think it's like 120 million people watch the halftime show every year. So, I don't know if 6 million or 35 million, whatever the number is, who tuned in to watching either the full show with Turning Point or just the clips. I don't know if that's going to make a huge dent for Jay-Z and the NFL if they're going to reconsider, but it was great that there was an alternative, that people could go direct their attention to something else, that there was something positive that was aligned with their values. And that's great. That's the free market. We should be offering alternatives. And so I think that overall it was positive for everybody, and we should be able to be happy about it. And I do agree with what you were saying about Bad Bunny's performance being different. And, I think it was obviously made for television. Like, it was not, there are clips now that are circling from people in the stands who paid, the $10,000 or whatever it is to be at the Super Bowl. They couldn't see what was going on. Like, this was not a performance that was for these football fans in the stands. They were just seeing the people dressed as grass dancing around. They saw Bad Bunny running in and out through all the houses and the sets. But this was made for television. This was for Bad Bunny's fans, people all around the world. It definitely is part of the NFL's huge push to, I would say, make the NFL more international. They're playing games overseas now. They're trying to bring in bigger fans. That seems like why they brought him on and why they made it so for television instead of just having him stand on a stage. So that was cool, but I can understand the frustration of people who were sitting there going, I can't even see what the man is doing. But anyway, so it was interesting. He's not my favorite performer. I also didn't love, as an American who speaks English, that I couldn't understand any of it. I think that having subtitles would have been a very easy way to include more people and try to find some common ground there. And I do think that there were, bits and pieces.
Hang on. So look, 54 million Americans have Spanish as their first language at home. Okay, and that number is accelerating very, very fast. It's comfortably the second most used language in America. And as I pointed out to other guests this week, Americans don't even speak American. You speak my language, English, right? You already speak a foreign language. It's mine, right? So this idea that because it's Spanish, all hell has to break loose, when 54 million people in the country speak Spanish as their first language, and many millions more understand it. Age hits you like a brick, and earlier than you think. It turns out that most men begin losing testosterone around the age of 30, about 1% every year. And even worse, a lot of what your body makes is blocked by proteins in the blood. Well, Mars Men helps turn back the clock naturally and free up usable testosterone. No needles, no synthetics, just real support. Users report feeling stronger, their recovery is better, and their energy is steady. Mars Men has 8 natural, clinically dosed ingredients. It's made in the United States and it's third-party tested. They offer a 90-day money-back guarantee with no risk. More than 91% of users report higher energy and thousands swear by it. For a limited time, Uncensored viewers get 50% off for life, plus free shipping and 3 free gifts at mengotomars.com. It's a perfect way to kick off the new year strong. That's mengotomars.com for 50% off and 3 free gifts at checkout. After your purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that I sent you. Yeah,
but this is
my point being, but Brett, when you hear Luciano, as I've said this to other people, when you hear Luciano Pavarotti sing Nessun Dorma, is your first thought, well, I can't understand a bloody word of it. Why doesn't he sing it in English? I don't even
know who that is, Piers. Maybe I'm just a dumb American. No, I don't even know who that is.
You don't know who Pavarotti is?
Okay, well, I know. Now I do know who that is, but I don't know what that song is or what you're referencing. But when I'm thinking about the NFL, when I'm thinking about football, which is a purely, it is a central part of American culture, I understand that people are going, hey, I would love to be able to watch the halftime show. And I'm not saying that he needed to speak, English or sing in English or change all his lyrics, but offering subtitles. I would say the same thing for Shakira, for people to actually be able to know what she's singing. And a great example of this is now people are debating on X. I don't know if you've seen, Piers, but they're pulling songs of his that are completely inappropriate. They're disgusting. They're incredibly sexual. And they're saying, how can you defend this? This was not actually traditional values. He sang this. People who speak Spanish are going, no, actually, that was not any of the songs that he sung. He was actually singing, different things from his portfolio. If we could all be on the same page and know what he was saying and be able to revel in that so it wasn't just a visual experience, regardless of who the performer was, I think that'd be great because it is in America. This is an American sport.
But the point I would make is Kid Rock's lyrics can be pretty fruity.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And so I agree with that. And I think that conservatives who, all hail Kid Rock, I think that that's kind of ridiculous. If you are angry about somebody else's, sexual songs and you're angry about whatever, I'm not a big fan of Kid Rock. I've never met the guy, but I did appreciate in his performance. And, if we're talking about what was more traditional and appealing to people, he started off with one of his songs from, the late 90s, early 2000s, where he was, singing about sex and lewd acts and that sort of thing. And then there was this whole transformation where then there was an acoustic Christian hymn that was played, and then he comes on stage as himself and he sings that Cody Johnson song. So it really, very much like Bad Bunny, he also had, a story that he was telling, and then he shows himself being redeemed and trying to find God. So there was a reason for that. And because it was in English, we could all hear that. But to your point about Kid Rock, I agree. I think it's ridiculous for people, especially on the right, who get their panties in a bunch and clutch their pearls about everything that Hollywood does and what people in the mainstream media do, to then, for example, with Nicki Minaj, just welcome her with open arms when, yes, she's hanging out with Donald Trump and Mike Johnson, but she's still posting videos twerking on private jets. I'm not going to say, oh, she's super conservative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the truth is, if Donald Trump, if Bad Bunny had said in the last few weeks, I quite like Donald Trump. Donald Trump's statement last night on Truth Social would not have been, this is the worst halftime act of all time. It would have been, Bad Bunny crushed it. I love Bad Bunny. In other words, none of this is really that intellectually honest. It's just tribal. It's politically tribal. That's it.
Well, I think it's people wanting to be outraged over something, which has just become such a tenet of American politics, probably just geopolitics in general, that we are always in search of something to be angry about. We always need to be fighting over the next thing. And it also, Pierce, becomes so serious. And I think this is something I've also talked a lot about on my show recently, where it's now, if you joke about something, if you say, oh, I found this funny, this is, kind of objectively humorous, but it's offending other people. It's how could you do this? This must be an endorsement of this. It's no, I'm not endorsing, for example, Bad Bunny's politics. I'm not endorsing him burning the American flag and, on stage with his shows or whatever it is, but I kind of enjoyed the sets. That was fine. And it's but things just can't be nuanced. I think we've become so partial to outrage and tribalism. So yeah, completely agree with you there.
But I think I wrote a whole book about this. I just think we've become such a boring, oversensitive society where people pretend to be outraged by everything, but they're not really. Like if I go out with friends to a pub or whatever, whether it's in New York or LA or London or whatever it is, we have a totally different conversation about stuff. Everyone's laughing about all these things. And then I turn on social media or cable news, whatever it may be, or shows like mine, and everyone's raging away like this is the end of the world because Bad Bunny, said something about ICE, which, by the way, ICE has not had a great month. Let's just be crystal clear. There are some things that ICE does that I agree with, but when you're shooting American citizens in the streets, it's probably not great for the image of ICE. You're allowed to be, as an American, as Bad Bunny is, you're allowed to be pissed off about that. A lot of people were. I was. And you should be able to express that under your First Amendment rights without the world caving in or without it being disqualifying for performing at the Super Bowl.
Yes, and to further that point, you are allowed to say all of those things. We live in the greatest country on earth, in my opinion, where you are allowed to criticize your government and speak your mind, but you are also not entitled to an audience, which that's why it's great that USA offered an alternative. So if you're outraged over it, turn your outrage to something positive, support the people who are doing something that is more in line with your values. And it's great that there was an alternative. And if you don't want to watch Kid Rock, there's the Puppy Bowl. I don't know if you watch the Puppy Bowl, Piers. It's amazing. You can turn on the Puppy Bowl and you can watch the rescue dogs. Last night's was extra depressing. They filmed it in October, but one of the dogs was like the special needs dog that was in this little...
I've got something you'll like. Because I broke my hip recently, and one of my sons gave me this. I don't know if you can see it.
That's great.
Be the person your dog thinks you are. Now, the slight problem is I don't have a dog. I have 2 Burmese cats, and they're much more inscrutable. But I do think, as a general rule of thumb, be the person your dog thinks you are. If more people thought that, I think we'd be in a much better place, right?
I'm glad you've solved politics, Piers.
How has motherhood changed you, Brett, in your outlook on life?
Oh, gosh. In every way, it completely changes your life. I think the first thing that comes to mind that I've been saying a lot is that I give less of a crap about things now. A lot of things, sort of in line with what we're talking about with politics, things seem less relevant to me in a lot of ways and less worthy of getting angry about. And I'm more interested in, just being honest and speaking my mind and not really caring if I offend people and finding humor in things. And I think a lot of that goes back to, I just, brought this child into the world. This is the most important thing in my life. I don't need to spend all of my energy being angry 24/7 about things. I would rather find humor and try to offer some unity and just common sense. And I think it was very easy, especially over the last couple of years, just to continuously get more and more angry and outraged by things and allow people on social media who are just sitting behind their phones 24/7 to derail the way that I view the world and my mental well-being and my joy. And I think that I'm a pretty joyful person. And so I think that has recalibrated me in a great way and to focus on the good things. But it's not just, I say that, and then I also want to acknowledge that it also has made me more serious about other things, because I want him to grow up in a world that is full of common sense. I want him to grow up in the country that I know and love, and not have it be, taken over by people who hate him as, a young white man. I want him to be able to grow up in a country with a strong economy so that he can buy a home and get a great job and start a family one day. And so it has made me more dedicated to fighting for the things that are good and true. But it has also, allowed me to sit back and go, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that we scream about online, it might be funny, it might be entertaining. It can just be that. It doesn't have to be the end of the world, because it's not the center of my world. So I think that's been a healthy recalibration for me.
Small businesses drive our economy, but securing capital is a constant struggle. Of the 36 million small businesses in the United States, over 70% report needing additional capital at least once per year. Big banks are burying owners in mountains of paperwork for months. If you want competitive bank rates without all those frustrating bank delays, visit our sponsor, cardiff.co/peers, for up to $500,000 in funding. Cardiff's application takes less than 5 minutes and has no impact on your personal credit. Approvals happen in minutes. Banks try to lock out small businesses. Cardiff has the key. Big banks may not want to approve your business loans, but Cardiff does. If you've been in business for at least a year and you're pulling in $20,000 a month in revenue, apply now for up to $500,000 in the same-day business funding at cardiff.co/peers. Again, that's cardiff.co/peers. Real growth, fast funding. Has it, do you think, or might it change your view of certain stories? I'll give you an example. The Epstein Files, you've been quite, I would say quite controversial here, but describing them as all bullshit. But I've got to say, as a parent myself, including of a 14-year-old girl, I don't think that. I mean, I'll play you the clip I'm talking about. Let's take a look.
Like, do you see how insane that is? Like, I feel like I've been going crazy. There is no clarity. There is no consensus, but everyone is telling their audience that they are certain, and the outrage is overwhelming. And in my opinion, it's all a bunch of bullshit, genuinely.
All right, well, Piers, that comment was not about what was in the files. It's about people's outrage and their certainty about what they're reading. That I was not saying that, the crimes that are, the crimes that Epstein committed, the fraud that he ushered in, the, allegations of him helping, leaders of other governments launder money, the fact that he was, teaching people in government how to leverage their political power into private sector power. It's the fact that we have people sitting on their shows saying, I can tell you for certain that this is exactly how it is. I've read everything. Bullshit. Most people have not read the 3.5 million files. I haven't. I'm not going to lie to my audience. And when we have people saying this confirms that Epstein is Mossad, we have Bibi Netanyahu saying this confirms that he was not Mossad. We have people saying this confirms that Donald Trump, was part of this and was sleeping with young girls, but Donald Trump is saying this absolves him. That is ridiculous. And we're all screaming at each other when guaranteed most people yelling and saying with certainty, I know this, have not read it. That is the part that's bullshit. And I would rather have people be honest and say, okay, so this is what I've read. Let's take a more, nuanced take of all of this. This is what we know. These are the things that are confirmed. These are the things that are redacted. These are accusations that were not verified, that were not solid enough to even be used in his cases. Let's just be honest. And so that was where I was upset, because I spent the entire week, I waited to do that episode until 7 days after the files were dropped, because I wanted to be able to consume as much information as I could without getting on my platform and saying, I know everything, when I don't. So it's not.
You see, it's interesting. It's interesting because I'm actually glad I asked you now, because your clarification of that, as you know, a lot of stuff gets, I've had this myself many times, where people will take a quote completely out of context and suddenly it blows up. And if you Google your name, it's Brett Cooper says Epstein Files are all bullshit, right? Yes. And it's so easy to do that. And it is quite infuriating, isn't it, when that happens? But I guess it's kind of the world we're in.
No, for sure. And you just have to let it roll off your back. A great rule of thumb for me has been that I have my name muted on X so that I don't have to consume discourse about myself, because it's like, I'm going to read my comments. I'm going to put things online. I can stand behind the things that I'm saying. And I know that when I'm writing an episode and I'm laying it out, I know the story that I'm weaving and how I'm going to get from point A to point B. And if people don't want to sit and watch the entire thing, that's totally fine. And I also know that I've been in a position where I've watched a clip and thought something, that somebody said was, true or certain, or that this is what they meant. And then I go and I watch the whole thing and I go, oh, I was completely incorrect about that. And usually when that happens, I get on my show and say, hey, I took the time and I learned from this, which I think is, that's an example I would like to set. So yeah, it's a lot of things get taken out of context, but that's the world we live in. That's the nature of our job and being online and people having technology to clip us. So yeah.
It certainly is. Now, you are a world authority on somebody called Clavicular, who I have to say hasn't brushed my life particularly. He got arrested at the weekend. First of all, who is Clavicular? I only know him because he was in that ridiculous van with Andrew Tate, Nick Fuentes, Sneeko, and the others in Miami. But who is Clavicular, and why has he been arrested?
All right, so Piers, Clavicular is a young man. I believe his name is Brayton, but he goes by Clavicular, and he is a looksmaxxer. Do you know what looksmaxxing is?
No. Educate me.
So looksmaxxing is this trend online where you are trying to make yourself look as physically attractive as possible. And it's basically like I'm taking autonomy for my well-being and how I look, and I'm going to try to elevate my perceived status through the way that I look. And at the beginning, when I first saw this taking off and saw people saying they're looksmaxxing, like the videos are kind of, cute. It's these guys who were maybe kind of awkward in high school. And then over the course of a couple of years, they start to care about their skin and their style, and they get a new haircut. They hit the gym. They're eating healthy. They're looksmaxxing. Clavicular takes this to the extreme, Piers. So he does something, for example, called bone smashing, where he takes a hammer to the jaw. And he believes that by fracturing, doing these like minute fractures on his jaw, it allows the jaw to grow back stronger and he's able to reform it. The most hilarious thing, which I definitely made fun of on my show, is that he puts, now you have daughters. I don't know if this is, inappropriate to say, you're also married, but there are these things called sticky boobs that women wear. Like if you're wearing like a strapless top, you put on like a little sticky boob bra. He puts those on his shoulders to try to make himself look more muscular. I'm not kidding. They're like chicken cutlets.
God, I'm learning so much here, Brett.
No, you're so welcome. This is your education. So he puts these under his shirt. But the most egregious thing is that he very openly does drugs. He talks about doing meth in order to help him fast so that he can lose weight. He takes Adderall, and these are all things that he talks about very openly. And he is 20 years old. He is talking about using illicit, illegal drugs on his live streams every single night. So honestly, it's like a wonder that he has not been arrested prior to this. And my first episode that I did about him when I discovered him is I was saying, like, especially to parents, like, this is the content that your kids online are consuming. Like, we can be able to look at this and go, this is hilarious and ridiculous. But there are people that are taking it seriously, that are wanting to take his advice. Right. That was my concern with it, especially for young impressionable minds. So that's clavicular. And the name clavicular comes from the clavicle and this idea with looksmaxxers that having like a big, strong, prominent clavicle is like a sign of peak attractiveness. So he goes by clavicular, I guess. But yes, he was arrested. He went to a frat party at ASU over the weekend. And interestingly, you might find this funny, Piers. He's having a profile done of him by the New York Times. And the only way that he agreed to let the New York Times do the profile was if they live streamed the entire interview on Kick. So if you go back, you can watch an entire New York Times journalist interviewing him for like hours. And it's honestly a smart move, because if they take anything out of context, he has thousands of people that were, watching it on stream. But that also, is a pitfall, because he was filmed. He had a prescription pill in his pocket, and I don't think he had the prescription on him. I don't know if he even has a prescription for it. He was also using a fake ID. They arrested him. Now the fake ID charge has been upped to a forgery charge. He's not allowed to leave Arizona, which is a big problem for him, Piers, because he was about to walk in New York Fashion Week. That's some exclusive tea that I have for you. So he's not going to be able to do that because he's stuck in Arizona. He's not allowed to do any drugs or be drinking. He has to be sober. So maybe we'll start seeing sober maxing instead of looks maxing. So yeah, that is clavicular. And basically overnight, he has become this viral sensation. And the language, this is also really interesting to me. He's basically created his own language on social media with words like clavicular and looks maxing. And he's not really a political figure, but all of his politics are based on how attractive you are. So you might have seen the viral.
What about this word?
Yes.
What about this other word I've heard? Mogging. Okay. What is mogging? Yes, okay, well,
that's what I was going to bring up, is that mogging means that you are like beating somebody with your attractiveness. So for instance, he said he doesn't want to vote for JD Vance if he is the candidate in a couple of years, because Gavin Newsom mogs JD Vance. Gavin Newsom has a better jawline, is more in shape. So that's what clavicular cares about. And so there was an especially viral clip where he walked into this ASU frat party and he was on his stream, and an ASU like frat leader frame mogged him. And frame mogged apparently means that his body was, I guess, that like was more in shape than claviculars. And so anyway, it's a whole thing. It's ridiculous, Piers. And so if your children start saying mogged, maxing, if they start saying, foid is another one. It's a term for women. Like foids will come up to clavicular. It is like, it's incredible how quickly these viral trends can take hold and how quickly these terms just be inserted into the lexicon. So anyway, that's Clavicular. It's crazy. So stay tuned. We'll see.
I mean, my issue with all those guys, I've interviewed Andrew Tate a number of times. I've interviewed his brother Tristan. I've interviewed Fuentes, obviously, Sneeko briefly with Kanye and a kind of farcical thing. But my issue with all of them is not that they're, in their own way, they're not all quite smart, because there are in a sort of streetwise, smart way. But there is a line, there's two lines that run through them all. One is a desire just to shock for the sake of being shocking, and to say things like in Fuentes' case, to joke about Hitler and the Holocaust, all that kind of thing, which is the kind of behavior you expect from a 13-year-old boy at school who's trying to, appeal to the class by being the class joker who thinks anything's funny. And they never seem to grow out of it. But secondly, there is a streak of real misogyny that runs through all of them, which I do think is really unpleasant. And it worries me that millions of young men, boys, watch this stuff and think the kind of casual misogyny is the way to treat women. That does concern me.
No, and I think if we go back to that now infamous stream in Miami, which really blew Clavicular up in a lot of ways, there was that whole clip of, gosh, what's his name? His name is Justin, and he's one of the friends of the Tate brothers. And he was talking to Clavicular and telling him how he never takes women on a date. He doesn't want to actually sit down and speak to a woman. And then there's another clip where he's like, you don't want to engage with hoes. You still want to sleep with them, but they shouldn't be one of your, top women. It's just like, it's disgusting. And maybe I'm numb to it now because it's very prevalent on social media, but I look at all of that and I laugh at it, honestly. Thankfully, in my circles, the friends of my husband's, my friends, the young men that I know, that hasn't taken hold, and most of the people in our circle laugh at it and see it as being like another form of reality TV and just being a ridiculous side of society. But again, the reason why I do episodes about this, and I might talk about how it's very funny and I get a kick out of it, at the end of the day, the point that I do try to make it at the end of every episode is that we can consume this kind of content. We can, engage it with it, laugh. I made a couple of jokes about Clavicular last night when I was posting about the Super Bowl. But at the end of the day, that is still content that we are subliminally, oh my God, I can't even speak right now, that we are consuming. And those are messages that we are consuming, whether we are intending to or not, especially with young, impressionable minds. And so it's important for parents to be aware of what their children are watching. And I would say the same thing for adults as well, like for the women who sit around, watching reality TV, which I definitely do sometimes. If you're watching shows like Too Hot to Handle, those are not teaching you, great values. Those are not encouraging, marriage and family and love and treating people with respect. And so I think it's important to know that, you can consume content that is humorous and entertaining and be aware that it is just that. It is entertainment. It is like watching a movie and you should walk away and be able to go, that's gross behavior. I laughed at it, but be able to distinguish between the two. And that's something that has been a common thread in my content for the last 4 years, is being able to dissect these things that are happening on social media and say, this is what young people are consuming. These are where our jokes are coming from. These are where our attitudes are coming from. Whether you know it or like it or not, this is how we're being influenced. So at least be aware of what you're consuming. Because even though I think the world would be a better place if everybody turned off their phones and stopped watching X, Y, and Z and didn't spend so much time scrolling on TikTok, that's not going to happen. We're all online. No. These figures are blowing up. We're consuming their content. So the best thing that you can do is at least be aware of the messages that they are sending.
I mean, I spend at least an hour a day watching lion reels, literally reels of lions in the African bush. I'm addicted.
That's much healthier.
Completely addicted.
Mine is
it's
all.
Just
mine
so
is all
weird, but it. Yeah, lion reels, I can watch them all day long. I think it's because I've got 2 cats and they're basically mini lions, but it's just, I find them fascinating. I just want to end by asking you how you're going to spend Valentine's Day. I assume with your husband, the father of your young son, but I'm assuming also you won't be going to see Wuthering Heights, the new movie, which opens on Valentine's Day.
No, I will not. I'm an English literature major, and I spent most of my time at UCLA focusing on literature from that era, actually. And I love British literature. I revere it. My favorite novel in the world that I spent the most time in school studying is Jane Eyre. So that was written by one of the Bronte sisters. And I just feel like this Wuthering Heights is a crime. It's a crime. And it was, the director has even admitted that this is just based on her sexual fantasy that she had while reading the book, down to the casting of Jacob Elordi and how she is perceiving it. Like, it is not a thoughtful, accurate adaptation of the book. It is a woman's sexual fantasy. And honestly, we're seeing more and more women be interested in reading smut and watching pornography. I think we've spent a lot of time shaming men about pornography and talking about the dangers of men consuming pornography. And we should be having that conversation with women as well, because what we're seeing is soft porn. When women say, oh, I'm reading this new romance book, it's smut. And so I think that's an important conversation that we should be having. So no, I will not be watching it, and it sucks, Piers, because it does look like it was shot beautifully. We can even round this out and go back to Bad Bunny, where, artistically, it looks like the cinematography is very cool. The costumes look incredible. Margot Robbie has looked fantastic on her press tour, but it's just not my cup of tea. So I'm not going to be consuming it. I think that it's weird and sexual and a crime against British literature. So yeah, we'll not be consuming that. I'll be out having dinner with my husband and our baby, and that's how I'll be enjoying my Valentine's Day.
Well, that sounds great. I just want to end actually talking of babies. There's a great clip doing the rounds. And it's the reaction of a young woman who apparently didn't want kids, holding a baby and breaking down in tears. Let's just take a quick look at this.
I had a fucking panic attack. Oh my God. I can't even wipe my eyes. I'm gonna get my tears on the baby. Right. Oh, you look beautiful. I can't look down. Look at her. What's her neck? She's so cute. Why so open? Oh my God, I need to have a kid. I need to have it. Oh my God. Oh, she's smiling. I want to take my top off and have skin-to-skin contact.
I mean,
Do you
so
think,
sweet.
Brett, if everyone just held a young baby for a minute or two, it would solve most of the world's problems?
I think so. It solved a lot of problems in my life, just being with my son. And it's so funny seeing videos like that, because it is, biology at work. There will always be, women who choose not to have children, but there is something that is so biological about a woman holding a baby and, feeling that connection, even with men too. Like, it has been such a special experience watching some of the, young men in my family's life, like my brother-in-laws, like them holding our son. And, they aren't married, they aren't close to having kids yet, but having that connection and watching that transform from, the first day that they held him to being so uncomfortable and like, oh, I'm going to break this baby and I don't know what to do, to, fast forward many months, they just, salivate over seeing him and are so excited to, hold him and play with him. And it's so natural. And watching that change within them is really special. So yeah, I mean, I knew that I always wanted to be a mom. I knew that that was going to be, the most important thing that I ever do in my life. It was the thing that I was most excited about, but that actually happening and seeing it, transform things in my life and my husband's life and our family's life and our friends, it's just very special. And it reiterates the point to me that I think having children is not only a wonderful thing to do just for you and for fulfillment, but it's also objectively, it is a hopeful and positive thing, because you were saying, I'm trusting enough in our world. I am hopeful that, infrastructure and a good society and a country will still be here for you. And I am going to fight for you. And it objectively is a very joyful, hopeful thing. So yeah, it has been a wonderful experience for us.
I always say, and I remember all my kids, I've got 4 kids, I remember them all being born, but the first time, I always think that moment when you take your first baby home and you open the door to your house and you walk in and you've got this tiny little thing and you suddenly realize it's all on you, right? Yeah. You've left the hospital, you've left all the care there. It's all on, for most people, it's all on you. And this little thing is reliant on you for absolutely everything. And then you realize, my oldest boy is like 32, right? You never stop feeling that about your kids. And it changes you irrevocably, in a great way. It just changes you irrevocably, because you ultimately stop being so selfish, because these little things are relying on you for everything, and they never stop that. And that's the wonder of life, I think. Brett, it's lovely to talk to you. Come back again soon. I really enjoyed it.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.